Welcome to Living Legacy Leadership, where we explore, discover, and share insights, tools, and strategies for a life well lived into elderhood. I'm your host, Donna Kim Brand, author, speaker, legacy strategy coach, and creator of the concept Living Legacy, where you choose to live life on your own terms while contributing to people, places, and projects along your life journey. I believe that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Now, the guests I bring to you each week all address some unique aspect of learning, leadership, or legacy. This helps you raise your own game as a leader in business and life, and also showcases some extraordinary people who exemplify living legacy leadership. At least once a month, I also offer a training session to skill you in game changer thinking for your own application. So, get your notebook ready or sharpen up your memory by tuning in your attention, and we'll dive right in. Well, have we bagged a big one for you today? I have to say, we are so thrilled to bring you someone who brings forth all those qualities of learning, leadership, and legacy, both in her own person and in the writings she creates. And that is Doris Weatherford. Now, she's a historian and an author, having published numerous books particularly on women's history for over 30 years, important works based on meticulous research and vibrant reading. Now, some of the titles include Foreign and Female, Immigrant Women in America, along with American Women in World War II, American Women's History, and, along with others, now, Victory for the Vote, the Fight for Women's Suffrage, and the Century That Followed. After growing up in Arkansas and Minnesota, she now resides in Florida. Now, Ms. Weatherford has managed political campaigns, chaired the Florida Women's Hall of Fame, and has been a trustee and teacher at several Florida universities, as well as serving on multiple boards, selection committees, and women's history projects. She's the recipient of, among many other awards, which we could frankly be here the whole time listing off to you, the League of Women Voters Lifetime Achievement Award. So welcome, Doris Weatherford.
Thank you. Makes me tired just to hear that list, doesn't it? You?
It's so thrilling, really. You know, your book, I know because it's literally hot off the press and you are being featured at Miami Book Fair as an author with this book. I had to work with a digital copy instead of a paperback or hardback copy. And I tell you, I was totally sucked in, totally riveted, and couldn't put it down, so to speak. And yes, and you have such a talent of weaving dense historical fact and story with a context that flows, and that's a very special skill. So congratulations.
Thank you. Like everything, I noticed your introduction about leadership, and it is so important to understand at the beginning of your life that you don't know everything then. Developing the skills, developing the knowledge base takes a long time, and you shouldn't be discouraged, and you should do it only if you love it. If you don't, find something else. But my husband and I decided a long time ago that life was a decision between money and time, and we were going to go for time. And we did what we wanted to do. He died last April.
Sorry to hear that.
And we have no regrets. We did what we wanted to do. I'm still doing some of it. So
now I understand in that you actually, I don't know if you still do, but you have led reading groups for girls.
Yes, that was one of the joys of my life. That actually grew out of the Girl Scouts asking me to raise money for them, and I said, I'm tired of raising money, but I don't have any contact with girls, and if you would like to put together a group of girls who like to read, so we carried on from the time they were about in the third grade until they were in college, and we met at my house, and we did a lot of traveling and cooking and so forth in addition to reading, and it was wonderful for me, and I think for them too.
Wow. Well, I mean, talk about choosing an investment of time over just fundraising dollars, that investment on your part in those young girls obviously will have ripple effects for their whole lives and everyone else they touch.
Yes, I think so too.
Mm.
I think so too. I wish the world would pay more attention to time than to money.
Mm. What a concept, right? Well, one of the things that struck me, and I fancy myself somewhat intelligent. I did AP history in high school way back when, and politically aware, if not terribly active at the moment in politics. But I was really surprised with those early feminists how astute their awareness of history is and their role in it when they were involved in it. Because I think a lot of people don't
people don't realize it, and they're not taught it. The winning the vote was the most sophisticated, longest, most expensive political campaign ever. And if you think about where we were when we started, having no rights, not even inheritance rights or property rights, to achieve that in 80 years, in some ways it seems like a long time. In other ways, it overturned millennia of discrimination against women, and even women's own self-absorption with what their roles should be. So they were magnificent leaders, and we could take many more lessons from the early feminist.
For sure. You had in the forward to the first edition little piece by Geraldine Ferrara where she commented on the remarkable and courageous challenge to the status quo deserves more than a footnote in American history. Not least, as you just mentioned, it took not only 72 years from the Seneca Falls Convention, which I'll ask you about in a minute, till the vote in 1919 and fully ratified in 1920 by the full Congress and all the states. But then another 70 or more years for further rights for women to be established. And yet, there's a quote, too, that the exhilaration of triumph is bittersweet if we lose it to complacency. So do you think we're at risk of that with women today?
Oh, yes. Women's history, actually all history, the history of democracy, is a series of peaks and valleys. We climb a hill. There's still a mountain range ahead of us, but we do go down to a valley through inertia and self-satisfaction, and frankly, not wanting to give credit to our mothers and grandmothers. Way too many young women think that they invented feminism, and they didn't. Here's one example. When I wrote my book on World War II, I wanted to follow that up with a book that I was going to call Forgotten 50s, about the era after World War II. And I proposed this to my agent, and her response was, "Oh, nothing happened then. That was my mother's generation."
Oh dear.
And there's way too much of that thinking that nobody did anything before me. And it comes from the way we are taught, with history as a footnote. Women's history as a footnote, instead of being incorporated into the curriculum, so that when you learn the 1850s, you also learn about the national women's rights movement that was going on in the 1850s. And most professors haven't taught that, and so teachers haven't taught it. It's better than it was, but it's still a ways to go.
Well, I think a lot of people nowadays would also be quite shocked to realize, and this was brought up right in the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, that the whole women's rights movement, particularly for the vote, was not only rooted in, as you say, moral conviction, but also the abolitionist movement. There was a very tie there.
Yep, absolutely. The abolitionist movement was the reason why we had the Seneca Falls Convention. Elizabeth Cady Stanton went to London on her honeymoon. She was 25 years old because her husband wanted to attend the World Anti-Slavery Conference. And Lucretia Mott, who was an older woman from Philadelphia, already had 7 children, was a leading anti-slavery person earlier than many, many people. And she also went. And there was a couple of others who were elected delegates from anti-slavery associations in America, made up mostly of Quakers. So these women went to London, paid their own way, and as I said, were elected delegates from their associations, but the men in London refused to seat them because they were women, and told them they had to sit behind a curtain because they would be too distracting. They could listen, but they couldn't speak, and they couldn't be seen, just like children. So Mott and Stanton were so outraged by this that they didn't go to any more sessions. They took walks in London parks, and they vowed that they would make a women's rights movement as well as a black rights movement when they got back to America. But they were both busy mothers, and so 8 years passed before finally Lucretia Mott went up to upstate New York to visit her sister who lived there, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton was living in Seneca Falls, New York. So they put a 3-line notice in the local paper that they were going to have a meeting on the rights of women. And to their tremendous surprise, some 300 people, women, men, and children, showed up for this 2-day meeting. So that was the beginning, and obviously it directly came out of the anti-slavery movement. And then when the Civil War came, they formalized it. They had meetings throughout the 1850s. And then when the Civil War came in the 1860s, they stopped meeting because their first goal had been anti-slavery, and they returned to that goal. And didn't get much thanks from anybody except William Lloyd Garrison.
Connection lost. Oh, dear.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And there were black women involved from the beginning, too. Sojourner Truth spoke her famous speech in 1853 at the Third Women's Rights Convention. So black women have been involved in the movement from the beginning.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it was pretty interesting, too, that you also said, feminism wasn't just for women. There were quite a few supportive men in the whole process and that married these women. Most of
Yes. Yeah. Henry
these
Blackwell,
women's rights advocates were actually married.
Yeah. Henry Blackwell, Lucy Stone's husband, is the most admirable of many of them. He continued to work in the cause after Lucy died. He ran all over the country making speeches. He allowed himself to be an object of scorn and derision to support these women. I think he was just a wonderful guy. And of course, his sisters are known as the first female physicians, Elizabeth Blackwell and escapes me the second one. Also started with an E, but Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to graduate from a credentialed medical college, and she was Henry Blackwell's sister and the sister-in-law of Lucy Stone.
Yeah, incredible. And what I didn't realize, Doris, was that women weren't allowed to speak in public until around this time, when they simply just stood up and claimed the right.
Yep. There was a genuine taboo on women speaking in public. This was not true of Quakers. They could speak. Quaker women could speak in meetings if the Spirit moved them, and so that's part of the reason why there were so many Quakers involved at the beginning. But there was a genuine taboo on women speaking until the Civil War made it necessary for women